Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my 10 favorite overbuilt folding knives in my collection. What does overbuilt mean? Does it mean really, really thick? Does it mean really, really durable? It kind of depends on the knife, right? It's kind of a loose term. You'll get what I mean when I start showing these knives. Now, to take the comment away that I know that a lot of people are going to leave, yes, fixed blades are more durable generally than folding knives. So you don't need to say that. I'm sure people will, right? If you're actually going to take a knife out and abuse it, a fixed blade is generally going to be the better option. But that's not really why people like overbuilt folding knives. At least that's not why I like them. I like them because they're kind of ridiculous. That's the whole point of this, is just to share with you guys some things that I really love. So I will link as many of these as I can. I'm going to tell you guys right now, some of these are just kind of unobtainable, right? But if you look down in the description, you will find links for this stuff so you can at least go look at the listing. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. The first 5 here are kind of just this kind of big, right? As we get later into the list, they become absolutely more durable in their locking system. So keep that in mind. Starting off here with one that is just absolutely gigantic, and that is the Midgard's Messer, the Viking. This thing is approaching 1/4 inch on the blade stock thickness. The blade steel on this guy is D2, a lot of titanium, pretty thick titanium, and it is absolutely gigantic. The overall length of this guy is coming in at 9.5 inches. The actual blade height, which is the part that people are really going to notice, is about 2.25 inches tall. This thing has an enormous amount of presence. It is a frame lock, right? And frame locks are, plenty strong. They're not the most durable locking systems on the market. But this thing, just because of the dimensions, will probably hold up to a little bit more abuse. Still, not suggesting you use a pocket knife for these types of things. There are better tools, and sometimes, like I said, fixed blades are the better option. But this is definitely something that I would call overbuilt. I like that it uses phosphor bronze washers, right? I also like the noise it makes when it locks out. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a ridiculous thing, and it's like holding a sword that was once much longer but then broken, I guess. Definitely a knife that puts a smile on my face. That's really what this list is about. Next up here, another frame lock. This is the Medford 187. As I've said many times before, it's really the only Medford that I feel that actually hits the value mark. This guy is an S90V. And has titanium scales. They call it the 187 because of the 187,000 stock material that they use throughout. So both of the scales and the blade, about the same thickness as an XM24. This guy has the external stops, which I like. I like that there's contact on both sides. Otherwise, it's another simple frame lock. These new ones have the over travel stops, right? The geometry of the blade on this is a little bit better than other Medfords, like the cutting geometry. And it also makes a little bit more sense ergonomically. Still, the thing is not going to be the most practical knife in the world. In fact, none of these knives make any pocket knife tasks that easy, right? They actually, they're a little bit more cumbersome, right? But definitely something that favors the side of durability, right, over other aspects. So definitely a cool one. I think these come in, if I didn't say the Viking came in originally at $300 or $350, I honestly can't remember. And then these Medford 187s, I think, start at something like $550. These guys are USA made, whereas the Viking is actually made in China by Concept. Moving on here, another titanium frame lock, one that I'm sure you expected to see on this list, and that's the XM18 3.5 inch. Largely for the same reason that I like the 187. It's got the external stops. This guy, a little bit more favoring the fidget factor end. It's a little bit easier to manipulate. Not the nicest thing on the index finger when you're flipping, because the flipper tab is shaped like a hook. But definitely, still very robust. The XM18 3.5 inch, not quite as thick as the Medford 187. In fact, the blade stock's only 165 thousandths, and the titanium, I think, is only 145,000, something like that. But still locks up the same way and should be roughly the same level of durability. These are very difficult to find. You guys probably know that by now, but if you didn't know that, Hind XM18s are very hard to find. Moving on here, another one that I'm sure you guys knew was going to be on the list. 1098, number 7, the XM24. Literally the exact same thing as the XM18 3.5 inch. It's just way bigger. The XM18 is 8.25 inches and the XM24 is 9.25 inches, unless I am mistaken, and it actually comes in at something like 9.5, which I'm second. Nah, it's 9.25, right? It's also thicker. I shouldn't say it's exactly the same thing. This guy has the same blade stock thickness as the Medford 187, but the titanium scales on either side, I think, are only about 165 thousandths. Again, you know, it's got the extra contact points with the external stops. There's just more material, so a little bit more surface contact. This will largely handle roughly the same types of, you know, like if we're gonna say abuse, right, which I don't want to center on because I know people will really lock in on that. It's going to handle roughly the same type of stuff that the last 3 I showed were able to handle. Moving on here, 10, 9, 8, 7, number 6. This is, again, the same thing, but it is just massively, massively thick. It's actually the thickest knife on this list, and that's the PMP Alpha Beast. This is actually a special variant in solid Damasteel. They only made 5 of these, but this recently was, you know, something that a lot of attention was on just because of how ridiculously thick it is. This will make pretty much any cutting task stupidly cumbersome. It's just going to be more difficult to push this blade through material. It's not, you know, this was really made just as like a thing to like look at and almost laugh at, right? The people behind this knife, the people from PMP, were really just making something that they knew was ridiculous, right? But for some reason, some people need to see it as a ridiculous object, and they need to tell people that it's not practical, as if people don't already realize that. People know that. Thank you for your help. It is absolutely well made, though, and it is definitely durable. I mean, it's like, the blade's not going to break. I mean, if we're going to talk about like knives with blades that are the least likely to break, literally every other part of this knife will disintegrate way before the blade breaks, which is usually the other way around. It's usually the blade will break and, you know, way before the locking system fails or anything like that. But I would say the pivot barrel area would bend out, and you might screw up the lock face geometry, right? Which is ridiculous. I mean, we're looking at 1/4 inch of titanium on either side. And while it looks like super early lockup, the amount of engagement between the lock face and the tang is actually massive. If you look at the area where it's locking up, there is a lot of surface area where that lock bar is actually contacting the blade tang. So this is overbuilt in the sense that it is just ridiculously thick, right? And if it would outlast the knives that are, right, I know that a lot of you think, you like that more than your Hinders. If we're just reducing it down to the overbuilt nature, right, then, you know, yeah, then I appreciate the overbuilt nature of this more than the Hinders. But this is a specific thing here. Yeah, this will largely handle the same type of stuff that the other ones would. It would just be more difficult to cut. And I just think, generally speaking, because the materials are so robust, it might outlast them in certain environments. But again, it's hard. I don't want to go into too much detail there because I have no idea. These are just more of the, they're just kind of big and crazy. Moving on here, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, number 5. Starting off with knives that are both robust and slightly more capable or more durable because of specific elements. This next knife is probably the most utilitarian of the entire group. And that's going to be the Cold Steel AD10. Not the thickest, not by a long shot, not the most robust or anything. It actually is very practical for a large knife. It has a reasonable blade stock thickness and a much more reasonable cutting edge. S35VN steel, this is G10, and then I think actually the liners here are aluminum, but the lock itself is what makes it so overbuilt and robust. This is the triad lock, obviously. Cold Steel fans, you can breathe. Don't worry, I put a triad lock on the list, right? But it is. If this list were about, the most utilitarian overbuilt knives, right, where the overbuilt nature actually translates to utility, then yes, the 8010 would probably take the cake all the way around. This is actually a super practical knife. If you're looking for, for that specifically, it's this. And these are available. You can get the light versions for less, but you can get these in S35EN for, I don't know, 150, 160, something like that. Super ridiculously strong lock. And this is the type of knife where the blade will break way before the lock does. You'll just be left with a piece of shrapnel surrounding the triad lock. That's how strong the thing is, right? Which is, overkill in and of itself, right? The triad lock is absolutely overkill. We really don't need that type of durability from our folding knives when, again, you could just use a fixed blade if you needed to do whatever it is that you're doing that would break your folding knife. But yeah, absolutely. I think that the 8010 is well deserving of the overbuilt title. Moving on here to number 4. And this is another insanely practical knife. I like it more, right? The reason that I'm not putting it above the 8010 in terms of practicality, but it is closer to the number 1 spot, is because I like it. I just like it more. And that's going to be, of course, the 8020. And this is not the 8020.5, not the little one made from Taiwan. That's this guy. This is the true USA one. This is the one that everybody goes nuts for, and then they look it up and find out what they're actually going for on eBay, and then they freak out, right? These are one of the most sought after knives in the entirety of the knife world right now, and specifically the titanium variants. Not necessarily ultra thick. These are about 180 thousandths on the spine, so in between an XM18 and an XM24. The titanium scales, I think, are only about 145 thousandths, but that shark lock is at least the same strength as the triad lock because of how it was made. If you didn't know, Andrew Demko invented the triad lock and the shark lock, and they are at least the same strength. The benefit here is that the shark lock is about 1,000 times easier to manipulate. It's just a little bit more user-friendly. I just really like this one. And while this is one of my favorite pocket knives of all time, again, if we're just isolating the overbuilt nature, right, and a few supporting elements here, yeah, this is well deserving of the number 4 spot on the list. I just really like this. And I like that its overbuilt features actually translate to utility. There are, again, I think the strength of the lock is pretty much overkill. But if this was the only thing I had, like, let's say the apocalypse happened, and it's like the only thing you can bring with you is a pocket knife, so what's it gonna be? Boy, I'd be happy if this is the one that I ended up with. I probably won't make it very far, but at least I've got a good cutting tool, right? So, absolutely. All right, moving on here. The last few here are kind of all of the above. They have, they definitely don't make the best and most efficient cutting tools. They are certainly the most all-around durable knives. Just in terms of, like, if we're talking about the durability and strength of the lock and, how thick the materials are, these are definitely the biggest and most robust. So starting off here with number 3, and that's going to be the Midgard's Messer Thunrar. That's just a frame lock. It is a big, hulking, massive frame lock with almost 1/4 inch on the blade stock and at least 187. It's probably more like 1/5 of an inch or maybe even approaching 1/4 inch on the, I think these are a little bit thinner. It is just a frame lock, but it's one of those knives that has the additional pin. This makes it to, this is basically at the point where we have the same number of contact points as the triad lock. You have the stop pin, you have the surface of the frame lock here, and then you also have an additional point of contact in this pin, making it to where even if you were to move the frame lock out of the way, it cannot disengage because of that pin. It's just not going to. This is an incredibly strong setup, and it just makes it to where, I don't know what would break first, honestly. I don't know if one of these contact points would fail before the blade would fracture. I would venture to guess that normally you would break the blade, but the problem is this blade is so ridiculously stubby, right? This is also CPMD2. Plenty tough, right? I honestly don't know. Every last bit of this knife is just ridiculously thick. The only issue here is, number one, it's not super utilitarian because the edge geometry, sorry, somebody's stomping around upstairs. The edge geometry is not the most, it's not going to be the most efficient. This one in particular actually gets relatively thin for such a thick blade stock because the blade is so tall. So it actually will slice and cut. But it's not going to be a super efficient cutting tool because you're still pushing a nearly 1/4 inch blade stock through whatever it is you're cutting. And also, in order to activate these ultra robust elements, you need to stop and slowly screw in a pin. I still really, really appreciate how absurdly overbuilt this thing is and the fact that I can actually engage this extra lock. It's really cool. The next one here is essentially exactly the same thing. It just has a little bit more meat to it. At least it feels. It's slightly heavier. That's the only reason it's in the number 2 spot, and that's the Midgard's Messer, the Beowulf, which is, again, it's largely the exact same thing. It's just got a little bit more meat to it, right? Big, thick titanium scales, gigantic backspacer. Again, we have a nearly 1/4 inch blade stock, CPM D2. I wish that these were like S45VN or something, but they're all gone now. And then, of course, you have the lock here, the secondary, the pin lock, right? So I guess there's one more reason that this is in the number 2 spot. It actually has yet another lock right here. This can actually be screwed all the way down, preventing the lock bar from even moving over in the first place. But again, even if it did, the lock can't disengage because of this pin. This little spinny disc thing is not the most reliable thing in the whole world, and sometimes I can't remember which way it's supposed to go, so it might slip out of place, right? But this knife, I feel like if we were just going to try to destroy all of these knives, right? The first 4 or 5, say for the PMP Alpha Beast, would probably, let's say at least the first 4 on this list would probably all fail at the same rate. The Alpha Beast may last a little bit longer because of the materials being so thick, right? And then after that, the rest of these knives would last, in my opinion, substantially longer because of how solid the locking systems are. Maybe the 8010's blade would break a little bit faster, maybe same with the 8020, I don't know. But as far as which knives would fail catastrophically, I think this legitimately would be about the second to last knife to fail. Not that the list is entirely based on that. It's really just do I like it, right? But the second half of this list, the more durable they get, the more that I like it for that specific reason. So yeah, there you go. So what do I have that's actually more overbuilt and more durable, right? Is the final knife truly the most overbuilt, most durable knife? Yeah, in my opinion, it is. The final knife, the number 1 most overbuilt knife in my collection, absolutely, is the Max Acephalestis. This thing is stupidly overbuilt. Number 1, it absolutely is. It's almost exactly a 1/4 inch thick on the blade stock. Doesn't look like it, but it is. It's just it's a much longer, and this way it's a little bit slimmer. The titanium is also nearly a 1/4 inch, and there is a lot of it, right? On top of that, we have massive external stops. There is a place for a pin lock, and this particular one, I didn't get it out of the box, but you can see the hole there. This pin lock is huge. It is huge. It's basically another 1/4 inch barrel outside of the pivot. It is much bigger than the pin locks on either of the Midgard's Messer knives. On top of that, we have a frame lock that is, you guessed it, massively thick. And then we have this locking wheel that is much, much more dependable and much more solid. Once that thing is engaged, it cannot, like this, I know that it's engaged, and it takes quite a bit of effort to get it there. This frame lock cannot engage. Once this is locked out, we have 2 points of contact for each of the stop pins, an additional point of contact for the frame lock. The frame lock can't move because of this disc, and then you can put a massive, at least 1/4 inch barrel through this hole right here, locking the blade out further. The robustness of everything combined with all of the locking systems makes this absolutely the most overbuilt and durable knife in my collection. And, you know, even if you don't, that's the thing, even if I don't use the pin or I don't use this secondary disc lock thing, the thing is already ridiculously robust. And it's also one of, as far as overbuilt knives go, it's one of the more practical ones. It's a flipper and it runs on bearings. So it's actually pretty easy to deploy. It's actually really comfortable to hold. And believe it or not, the cutting edge is quite a bit thinner than you might expect. It's still thick behind the edge, but it's one of the better slicers of this bunch. This absolutely takes the cake. I mean, this is the knife that really kind of got the first knife that I gave the title of great knife to, which is, you know, I say that that's a term that kind of defines the crazy, insane, and usually unnecessary overbuilt nature of some of these knives. But it's combined with a much more refined, like more traditional knife, like, you know, or at least like in the enthusiast world, it has all of like the ultra precision machining refinements, the really good action, right, and the tuned detent and all that. It's got all the nice finish work on it. It's just crazy. This knife combines a lot of different things that I never thought I would see all together. So, yeah, definitely deserving of the #1 spot. Again, I'm not suggesting that these knives are better than regular pocket knives. Not at all. A regular pocket knife is still the better option because it is lighter and smaller and has better cutting geometry and will still handle 99.9% of the reasonable tasks that you would normally expect a pocket knife to be able to accomplish, right? So prying the door off of a bomb shelter, scaling a building, right? But even batoning, that's not what we expect of our pocket knives, right? It's not a normal thing. There are better tools for that, right? But, you know, if you were wondering, that's what we've got here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was a video I've been wanting to do for a while. Like I said, I'll link this stuff down in the description, whether you can actually get it or not. So feel free to check those out. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.